Shannon McCowan on the Bob McCowan podcast for you. Jay Woodcroft is going to join us, the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers, not new anymore, but the existing head coach. But before we get to him, yesterday we spent some time with Brian Cooper, our sports business expert, on the arrival of legal sports betting in Canada. And I want to read you a little something, Mr. Shannon.
Okay.
And I want you to see if you can guess, and it may give it away, but who the speaker was here. Quote, "The NFL is the most popular and widely recognized professional football league in the United States. The great popularity of NFL football and the goodwill it has achieved with its fans and the public as a whole is rooted in the integrity of the game itself. NFL football stands for clean, healthy competition and rewards hard work, dedication, and honest effort. Maintaining these values and the highest integrity of the game of professional football is a critical aspect of preserving the NFL's goodwill. For these reasons, NFL owners and players have worked diligently since the league's inception nearly 90 years ago to protect the NFL's integrity and maintain the public's confidence in the league. The spread of sports betting, including the introduction of sports betting as proposed by the state of New Jersey, threatens to damage irreparably the integrity of and public confidence in NFL football."
Is Roger Goodell.
Roger Goodell, August 10th, 2012, to the U.S. District Court, District of New Jersey, in response to the state's proposal. It gives you the book, by the way, in which that I was reading this from is called A Season in the Abyss by Brian Toohey. Oops, if I can show that to those people who are looking at it.
There it is.
If you're intrigued by what Mr. Goodell said there and all of the other things that are involved in gambling and the NFL's long time involvement in gambling, you should get this book. I read it years ago and picked it up again yesterday after our conversation with Brian and started to read through it. And it is mind-boggling. The founders of this National Football League were all degenerate gamblers or involved in bookmaking, illegal bookmaking, horse racing, every kind of wagering you could imagine. And for years said what Goodell said there, that this was dangerous and no good.
Right.
And now it's the same kind of thing that Bettman said with the NHL, of the commissioner of baseball has said over and over again. And what I maintained for a number of years, and I think I've been proven to be correct, is the reason they didn't like gambling is because they didn't have a piece of it. And once they got a piece of it, now they're all happy and snuggly with it. There you go.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I mean, if you could monetize it and create a revenue stream, then life is good. The question I have, Bob, is and whether it be point shaving. Remember how point shaving was the worst of all things that could ever happen in sports?
Yeah, and it's so rare.
But I'm just saying, and remember, before most of our listeners' time, Alex Karras and Paul Hornung suspended for a year for gambling. What Pete Rose went through in baseball. The question becomes is how with gambling the way it's going to be set up, does there need to be a level of policing and maintaining integrity, or is that just me being, pie in the sky?
You don't have to police anything. The game is actually better policed by the sports betting community than it is by the leagues themselves. The sports betting community hears through the grapevine or sees through the size of wagers that. So you're
saying legitimizing gambling will allow more transparency?
No, it'll allow the infrastructure known as the sports betting community to monitor the action the way they have for years. Not that the NFL or any other league would do anything about it. Every once in a while, you see a game that is taken off the board, and it is taken off the board for a very few reasons. One, and what most people believe, is an injury to a player, and that may be true.
Yeah.
And the game will come off the board for a period of time. They'll find out whether the guy's seriously injured, not going to play, whatever, and then put it back up. Or it could happen because a significant wager or series of wagers has been placed on a team that is out of the, it's extraordinary and suspicious, and they'll take the game right off the board. National Football League isn't going to quit playing.
No, but so that policing will be done by the sports betting companies, as opposed to the leagues.
Oh, it won't be done by the league. It'll be done by the casinos and the sports betting operations. Yes, as it always has. Yeah. And they will do their own investigation and try and find out the source of the information.
Like Tim McGahey, the whole thing with him as an NBA referee. Do we run the risk of that occurring again?
I really can't speak to the specifics of it, but my guess is that the sports betting community had some suspicion, may have even acted on it, and the NBA couldn't care less. The NBA was in the business of protecting one of its officials, and that's what they did until the story got out, and then they threw him under the bus, which is what they always do.
Right.
So, but I think it's interesting if you're, as we start down the road of legalized sports betting, a season. Oops, I always did this backwards. A Season in the Abyss is an absolutely fascinating must-read. You'll go through the Maras, the Rooneys, the founders of the NFL were all involved in gambling or degenerate gamblers themselves. And the hypocrisy that they showed for all those years has always left a bad taste in my mouth. We'll take the break. When we come back, he's the head coach. I guess still new head coach.
Yeah, I know. He's the new Edmonton Oilers. It's been about 50 days.
Yeah, he's about 26 games in. Jay Woodcroft will join us. To many of you, we'll introduce you. Back after these messages. McCowan and Shannon back with you. For those teams in the Eastern Conference, there are still questions as to who finishes where, but who gets into the playoffs is pretty much a foregone conclusion, has been for a little while now. Not necessarily so in the West. The race is pretty intense. Joining us, the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers, Jay Woodcroft, is with us from San Jose today. Welcome to the program. This has been quite an interesting ride for this team. You haven't been on all of it, but I don't know. Have you seen a team that has been as, I hate to say streaky, but this has almost been like 3 different seasons in one for the Oilers, hasn't it?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Bob and John. Really appreciate you including me today. So thank you very much for that.
Our pleasure.
In terms of the season, obviously, when you're coaching in the American League, your focus is on your own team and trying to make sure that you're pushing the younger prospects forward and helping move the needle for the organization in that regard. That said, you still pay attention to what's going on with your parent club. You're cheering for them. You're invested in their success. So I did notice, obviously, the way the team got out of the gate so well, and then it had its struggles there for a little while. But my experience being with our team since February 10th or so, I've found a group of players that I thought was very amenable to making a few small changes. And, we've had some good results here over the last 25, 26 games. So I'm pleased where we're at as we head down the stretch run.
How much of an advantage, Jay, is it that I think it's 13 of the guys on the Oilers roster you actually coached in the American League? How much of an advantage is that?
Well, what I think it does, John, is it eliminates the initial getting to know you phase. So they have an understanding of what your core beliefs might be as a coach. They have an understanding of what your language is. They have an understanding of how you want the game to be played and what the expectations are. So I think that does help. You mentioned the guys that have come through the program that we had running in Bakersfield, but it also had some had coached other players in different places, not just in my time in Edmonton as an assistant coach. Obviously, for our core guys like Leon, Connor, Nuge, and Darnell, I've seen those guys as an assistant coach in Edmonton, but there were other players that I coached along the way. Tyson Berry, a coach at a World Championships. Same with Mike Smith. So I had a lot of established relationships, which I think helped me make the transition.
You talked about language. Is your terminology would it be a little bit different than Dave Tippett's?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I think you have different ways of getting your point across. You might call a different situation. You might use different words, and in the end, I think language it's a coach's currency. It helps lead to speed, because when you're describing something or you want something done quickly, you can go to a few key words that you might use, and everybody knows what you're talking about.
It would seem to me that each organization would have a system that they would like their coaches at the various levels to follow the same kind of pattern and plane. That being the case, given that you were, elevated to your current job from being the minor league coach, that you probably were coaching, trying to do the similar kinds of things would make sense. But is that the case? Or were you permitted to be fundamentally different than, your predecessor with Edmonton?
Yeah, I think, Bob, the way most teams would operate is the coaching staffs get together before the season and they talk through different systems, different ways you want to handle opponents, all that kind of stuff, and the way you operate. I think since my time in the Oilers organization, both on the NHL staff as an assistant and on the American League staff as a head coach, I've had that experience of being in those meetings. I think the one thing that I had leeway with was, in the end, that's the framework of the way the organization wants your teams to play, and that it's certainly part of the job of the American League coach is to follow that framework, because when someone gets called up from the American League, you don't want them having to relearn the game of hockey at the National Hockey League level. You want that transition to be seamless. You want to make sure that there's a proper alignment between the way you do things at the NHL level and the American League level. But what I've always felt, whether it was with Todd McLellan as the head coach, Ken Hitchcock as the head coach, or Dave Tippett as the head coach at the NHL level, I always felt that they left enough leeway for you to bring your own ingredients to the table within the framework of that system.
Do you consider yourself a coach of a team, a group, or a coach of an individual? And that may be an obtuse question, but I'm intrigued by your response to it.
Ooh, I would say that right now I coach 23 different types of individuals. We're going to coach each player one at a time. So each player responds differently to different types of situation or stimulus. We'll coach them each one at a time, but within the framework of the way we want the team to operate, or within the framework of the way we want the team to look on a day in, day out basis. I'm quite aware that this new generation of player has certain demands in terms of communication. And when I say that, I mean, I think that's just typical. As new generations come into the sport, they respond differently to different types of teaching. And what I've learned over my time, my previous time in the NHL, 13 years in the NHL, and then 3.5 in the American League, is that it's important that you're able to get your message across to the group, that everybody understands where they fit within the team structure, but that you do have to coach them one at a time.
How much of that is trying to explain why?
I think that's a big part of it. I think, even when I first got into the NHL in Detroit in an entry level capacity, you had guys like Yzerman and Shanahan and Robert Lang and Matthew Schneider and these type of guys. And they had come up through a way of doing things where if the coach just said something, you did it. And I think things have evolved now, where I think the best coaches in the world, they can not only explain what you're going to do, but they take pride in explaining how you're going to do it. And probably most importantly, they explain why you're going to do it and why the individual is going to have success within that team framework.
I would think that coaching at the American League level, at the minor league level, generally speaking, you have younger players. Generally speaking, you have imperfect subjects, and that there is significantly more teaching that goes on at that level than in the NHL. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I think you're bang on. You have the majority of the players at that level are just coming into professional hockey. They have to make the life adjustment of being on their own, maybe for the first time. The life adjustment of being able to compartmentalize your work life and your personal life, the ability to understand that you are now playing with and against and competing with and against people whose livelihoods are on the line. And that's a big adjustment. And in my experience in American League, it's taken some players straight out of major, junior, or college hockey a little bit of time to adjust. So there is a lot of teaching moments. There's a lot of growing moments. There's almost stages within an American League season. And at this level, it's a winning business. It's not so much worried about unfinished products and player development. And obviously, you have an understanding that you still want to develop people, but this level, it's about it's a results-driven business, and you're dealing with not finished products, but a little bit farther along the assembly line in terms of the skill level of players, the mindsets of players, and their ability to absorb the things you're trying to get across.
When Todd got let go in Edmonton, you were given the choice that summer to go and coach in the American League.
Yeah.
You probably could have joined Todd in LA. But what was it going to the American League was important to you?
Well, I thought I was at a point in time where I had to make a decision if I wanted to be a National Hockey League head coach. I felt that my resume, I ticked a lot of boxes on my resume. So I had been able to work my way up incrementally in the coaching world. I hit all the necessary steps. I had international experience, had the opportunity to win a Stanley Cup on a great staff in Detroit, won a world championship with one of the best teams Canada had assembled in 2015. And also had a great opportunity at the World Cup of Hockey. So I had ticked all those boxes, but the one question I felt that remained was, could he run his own bench? Could he do the necessary things day in, day out to display and model leadership at a high level? And I felt that it was in my best interest, if I truly wanted to be an NHL head coach, that I had to go and show it. And I'm very fortunate that I was afforded that opportunity. I'm proud of the players that have come through that program in Bakersfield. I got to work with a lot of really good people. And, I think tried to leave it in a place that might've been just a little bit better than when we found it.
And quite frankly, when you're making that decision, so that was your late 30s, early 40s.
Yep.
That's not your decision by yourself, is it? I mean, you've got a young family, and your wife has to make more sacrifices than you do because you're out there having fun coaching.
Yeah, thank God I married up, John. And yeah, no, my wife and family are completely supportive of the decisions we're making with the career. And probably the hardest thing for me since being recalled from Bakersfield and up to Edmonton has been being away from them. So I haven't seen them in 2 months or so. Right. But I'm set to see them here in the next couple of weeks, because they're going to come up for their Easter break, and I miss them like crazy. So I'm really excited.
I was talking to Todd when the Kings were in last week, and because I was asking him about that first night you guys, I think it was your third game.
Yeah.
When you coached in LA, and there he is. There's one of the guys that's helped you along your career, and he's on the other bench, and you're on the Oiler bench. And I said, what was that like? He said, well, it was okay, because like Jay's wife and their kids were at the house all day. So this is a relationship that is deep and important to you, well beyond the game of hockey, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the term I've tried to say when I've been asked about him is I think he took a chance on me as a young coach. He taught me a lot as a young coach, but even more as a young person. And I learned a lot just through the eloquence of his example.
I've got to tell you one story. So about 2 weeks ago, when I was out in Edmonton and you and I had coffee, and I went back to my hotel room and texted Mike Babcock and said, why did you like Jay Woodcroft on your staff? The phone rang 14 seconds later, and it was Mike. And then he proceeded for 20 minutes to tell me why you were the greatest thing since sliced bread. And how in his opinion, you had been on a 17-year internship to be a head coach in the National Hockey League. When you think about a guy like Todd, you've mentioned Hitch, Mike Babcock, those are three pretty good mentors within the game of hockey. Do you lean on them still?
Absolutely. I think everybody's a product of their influences. Mine began with great home life and my parents and my brothers. And then
both your brothers are coaches, right?
Yeah, both my brothers are coaches at a very high level. One's in the KHL and one's in U.S. college hockey. I spent a lot of time in the National Hockey League. But in terms of professional influences, if you go back to that staff in Detroit, and I had never met anybody until the first day of work in Detroit. So most of my conversations or dealings with Mike were over the phone. It had been over a few months. Staff, you had Mike, obviously one of the top coaches of our generation. You had Todd McClellan, who went on to become one of the best coaches of this era, just passed 1,000 games. You had Paul McLean, who won a Jack Adams Award, and myself. So as a young man, you talk about having the good fortune of being able to be in that room. I went in with my ears open and my eyes open, and tried to work very hard and try and hit the steps along the way. I would also add that at that time in Detroit, Ken Holland's obviously the general manager, but Jim Nill, who's gone on to great things in his own right. Scotty Bowman was a resource for the coaching staff there. So very fortunate as a young guy to have those types of influences.
What do you perceive as your strengths? What kind of a coach would you describe yourself as?
Well, I would describe myself as a student of the game, someone with an endlessly curious mind, with an ability to communicate. I like to put our players first, and I'm constantly pushing. I'm pretty persistent in trying to find new ways to improve, trying to find competitive advantages for our team. And, I think that comes from a burning desire to be the best.
How much of it is building consensus amongst the players, Jay?
Well, I don't know if it's as much consensus. I think you want to make sure that the players are on board with what you're trying to do. I might canvass their opinion, but in the end, I think the best players in the world want to be led, involving them in that part of the process by, communicating with them on a daily basis asking them what they were seeing in certain situations or what they feel is happening around the league. I think that's important. But in the end, it's the coaching staff's job to kind of set the way of being for the team, and including the players in that process is important for sure.
Developing this unique relationship with the players must be an intriguing process. You want to be respected, you want to be listened to. You don't want to be too friendly, but you don't want to be too distant either. Is it harder at the NHL level than it is at the minor league level?
Well, Bob, I would actually say that it's one of the things I miss most about being an assistant coach is the rapport you have with the players that arises off your daily interactions. What I mean by that is, it's the time before practice where you're working on a specific skill and it's not as formal. It's showing somebody an individual clip to help them move the needle in their own game. So I miss that ever since became a head coach. I understand that there are times when I do have to make very difficult decisions. So there is a little bit of a layer between a head coach and the players. I think it's important to show your players your care for them. And you can do that in different ways. It can be small things, small conversations you might have around the coffee pot. It might be how you treat them on the bench after they've had a tough shift. It might be genuinely inquiring about what's going on in their lives away from the rink. I think when you're authentic, and when your players know that you care about them, I think they perform better. That's just my opinion.
It's interesting. So when you're behind the bench, is there ever a negative tone to how you talk to a player?
Oh yeah, sometimes. Yeah, for sure. It's not sunshine and rainbows. I can tell you that. And what might get presented to the general public or the media, it might be a little different tone inside a dressing room. I've been known to drop a few swear words now and then, but I think when you're direct and upfront and honest about things, I think the players respond to that.
You're as you look kind of up the food chain in the Oilers organization, you got a couple of guys that have not big shoes to fill because it's a totally different role, but guys I'm sure you expect. Do you have much conversation with Bob Nicholson?
Yes. Yeah. Bob's around quite a bit. He's a great resource to talk to. You talk about someone who might have a master's in human relations.
Yeah.
Just talking through situations with him, it doesn't even have to be hockey specific. He's a great resource for me. He's been a great friend over the last 7.5 years I've been in the organization or so. Obviously Ken Holland, someone that I see on a daily basis and talk hockey with. We have good people in our organization, proud people, people who want to win. They're driven to win. And, for a young coach to have those resources on hand, let alone all the alumni that are around, I think it's a real positive for me as a young coach.
So you've coached around, it's about 50 days. What's it like coaching in a Canadian city?
Well, I think we have the best and most passionate fan base in the entire National Hockey League. I think the biggest difference is when I was the head coach in Bakersfield, California, we had one beat writer for the Bakersfield Californian, and there might be a couple cameras after the game or whatnot, but obviously dealing with the media demands in a Canadian city, I think that's been an adjustment. it's a part of the job. I realize it's part of the job. I try and look at it as a positive in terms of being able to connect with the fan base. And I understand the media has their job to do, and I try and help them accomplish what they need to get done. But primarily, I use it as an opportunity to connect with our fans.
No, let's be honest here. You're 17-7-2 since you took over.
Yeah.
So there hasn't been very much criticism.
I don't know. We lost against Calgary the other night, John. There's a lot of criticism after that one. Probably rightfully so too.
Well, there wasn't more criticism outside than there was in the room. I can guarantee you that.
You're right. You're right about that.
I'm just wondering that, and you spent time in Detroit. You were in San Jose with Todd. There is a real difference about coaching in Canada, isn't there?
Oh, for sure. I mean, when we've won a game or two, people are elated and they're asking, about your power play units, or, they're interested in who's coming in the lineup or who the starting goalie is going to be. But if we've lost a game or two and I walk down the street there, I'm people let it be known quite clearly that they want it turned around fast.
With Jay Woodcroft, the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers, we'll continue the conversation after these messages. McCowan is Shannon, and Jay Woodcroft is with us, the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers. You're talking about fan reaction. So you're not unfamiliar to Edmonton fans, but now you come in as the head coach. How does that change the reaction you get when you're walking down the street?
Yeah, I think people want to talk hockey with you a little bit more, and
they want to tell you what they know, right?
Yeah, exactly. But in a good way. It's passion, and I'm passionate about the game of hockey. I love to talk about it, and it's fun. I think it's fun. Are there pressures? Yeah, there's pressures that come along with being a head coach in a Canadian market, specifically one that's so driven to win, like Edmonton is. And it is a big difference. John mentioned San Jose and Detroit, my two previous stops in the National Hockey League. Those are both great hockey cities in their own right, passionate in their own way, but it's next level up in Edmonton.
Yeah. Actually, we should probably do some actual information here. Leon's okay?
Yeah. I mean, he went into the wall there. He's bruised a little bit, but he's okay. Specifically after he scored his 50th, scored his 100th point.
I was going to say, people were freaking out. What's he doing playing? He's hurt. What's he doing playing? I don't think you guys would have let him play had he been less than 100%.
No, we obviously Leon's an important player for our team. He's somebody who, if there was any way that he was going to re-injure something or couldn't work his way through the game, we would have shut him down immediately. So happy that he got through it. Happy that he got his 50th goal and 100th point.
Just you talked about coaching individuals within the team. You have two of the elite players in the game. Do you approach them differently? Do you approach Connor differently than Leon?
I would say that I approach each player a little bit differently, based on either shared circumstances or things I know about that player or how they respond to different situations. But you're asking about two superstars, two guys that are leading the NHL in points, and one's competing for the Rocket Richard Trophy, all that kind of stuff. I think those two guys, and in my experience in Detroit and San Jose, I think the best players in the world, they want to be led. They want to be helped. They want to be coached. And that's what sets them apart. They're extremely driven to achieve what they want to achieve. Now, both of those guys have hit 100 points. And I said to our local media here, I think both of them are consumed with getting our team to 100 points because they want the opportunity to punch the ticket to the dance and compete for the Stanley Cup.
Well, to that end, you're kind of you're the ham in the sandwich right now. You're a few points back at Calgary, one back of LA, a couple up on Vegas, although I think you guys have a game in hand over Vegas
and LA too, actually.
Yeah. Is that a topic of conversation around this time of year in the room? Do you address that? Do you address where you are and what you guys need to do, or do you try and focus just on the team on the ice that you're playing that night?
Yeah, I think on February 10th, when I got the call and Dave Manson and I came up from Bakersfield, one of the things we wanted to do, and we kept saying and beating on the drum, is to keep our picture small. I think the team at that time was 5 or 6 points out of the playoff picture. But we just wanted to keep the picture small. We wanted to focus on the day's business. We felt if we could just get a little bit better each day, and it sounds like a corny thing to say, but we tried to speak it into existence, whether it was through a meeting, whether it was through a workout, whether it was how we traveled. We just wanted to put our focus on the day's business. And I think when you do that and you steer the conversation towards your process, that eventually the results take care of themselves. So we've gotten good results during that time frame. And so I don't spend a whole lot of time talking about where Vegas is at, or who Calgary's playing tonight, or if LA won or lost. We spend more of our time putting our focus on us. We're aware of our surroundings. We're aware of what's happening in the NHL, but our focus isn't there.
What has Dave Manson brought to your team?
Well, Dave, for me, I joke around that he's my left tackle. He takes care of.
He's big enough to be a left tackle.
Yeah, he's big enough to be. But he takes care of my blind sides. He puts out a lot of fires. He's an extremely talented coach. I have a ton of respect for him. He's somebody I didn't know until I hired him in Bakersfield. Did a lot of work on him, but he's somebody who. And when I put that staff together back then, I wanted to find somebody who was different than me. And he certainly is different from me. He's somebody who played over 1,000 games in the NHL. He was a all-star defenseman. He was tough as nails. He was a first-round draft pick. So he has this myriad of different experiences to draw from as a player. And he has a way of getting his point across that I think really resonates with especially D-men. So what do I think he's brought? I think he brings those experiences into his coaching. The other thing I really like about him, and I don't think he gets enough credit for, is how talented of a coach he is. He's somebody who just stopped playing and got airlifted into an NHL opportunity. This guy went back to Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. He raised his family. He coached youth hockey, worked his way up to helping the WHL team rebuild. He spent years on the buses in the WHL. He's passionate about the coaching side of it as well. He just brings a ton of experience, ton of passion, and I'm thankful that he is my left tackle.
Well, we found out something we did not know, or I did not know about you there in that sentence. Obviously, you are right-handed.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, it'd be your right tackle if
That's
you were
right.
Kenny Stabler or another left-handed quarterback. So there you go.
There you go.
And I assume you're something of a football fan as well, with that reference.
Sure, I'm a sports fan, Bob, for sure.
So, what's we talked about your two brothers. One's at the University of Vermont, the other one's in the KHL. What's summer at the cottage with the Woodcroft boys like? Is it a coaching symposium?
We've either spoke at a few symposiums in the summertime, or we talk a lot of hockey for sure. We were talking about professional influences a while back, but obviously for me, being the youngest of three boys, my brothers were huge influences. It's why I wanted to go to the rink all the time. It's probably why I got my start as a student of the game, because I was watching these guys play. I wasn't just in the arcade, goofing around. I was trying to watch and learn from them. And they're both passionate hockey people, talented coaches in their own right, have great experiences. They both have international experiences. And I'm thankful they're my brothers, because they're a huge influence on me.
You got a chance to be around the Oilers club as the head coach during the trade deadline. How involved as a coach were you in the process of deciding? I know it's the general manager's responsibility, and Kenny looked after it, but were you included in that whole exercise?
Yeah, you know what? I was in the room, and that was nice. It was a unique experience as a head coach to get that opportunity to be in the room. What I said at the time was, I'm so new to being a head coach in the National Hockey League. The lane I try and stay in, the lane I try and operate in, is trying to get the most out of the people in front of me. But that said, yeah, I've been around the league a while. I understand the players on different teams and what their skill sets might be. So if asked the question, I do believe I have an informed opinion. So I was glad that I was in the room for that.
Was that the first time you were in the room at trade deadline, or as an assistant, were you in there before?
Yeah, yes. Sometimes as an assistant, it's not specifically at the deadline in the room. It's more, you might get canvassed for your opinion beforehand or whatnot, but to actually see how it goes down was an interesting process. And obviously Ken's got a ton of experience and believes in his staff. And if asked the opinion, if I had an opinion on a player, I was not afraid to share it.
One of the issues on your team has been the goaltending. Mikko Koskinen has the flu or something like that, not COVID, non-COVID illness. How much pressure on you about your goaltending?
Well, you mentioned that the record since February 10th has been 17-7-2. You don't get that without goaltending that's performing at a certain level.
Yeah.
So there is much a part of that as any other player or any coaching change, anything like that. Our goaltenders are there. And I think all three of the goalies that we've had at our disposal, whether it be Mikko Koskinen or Mike Smith or Stuart Skinner, have found ways to contribute to that record. We look at our game last night. Mike Smith put a heck of a game in under different circumstances because, obviously Mikko Koskinen woke up not feeling proper. So everybody's found a way to contribute. I think as we weave our way down the stretch, it'll be interesting to see who emerges.
Will you use Skinner on this trip?
We'll see. We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
We'll wait and see. We haven't made any, hard and fast decisions on that just yet.
You went undrafted as a kid, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a sore point, Bob. Don't bring that up.
No, it's not.
No,
it's not.
No, but it may speak to something, and I'm wondering whether it does. Do you feel like you have maybe a softer spot for the guy who wasn't a first round or second round draft choice who, battled? And I'm trying to think of a specific name on your team, but I'm sure there are several. Do you feel like you can identify a bit more with that kind of player rather than your superstars? And you got a couple that are right near the top of the food chain.
I think I can identify with people that maybe weren't at the highest, haven't been the best players since they've been 5 years old, for sure. I always felt as, and I was able to get an education and play in the minors and whatnot. And I was quite pleased with getting the most out of what my ability was. And I tried to get the most out of what my ability was. I met a lot of really good people along the way and had a ton of great experiences. But I felt I was a late bloomer. And so I tried to stick with it because I loved the game. And for me, do I identify with players that have had similar paths? Sure. I understand what it takes to get to the very highest of high levels. I'll never forget that my first training camp in Traverse City, Michigan with the Detroit Red Wings, I had just come off playing and had my most productive year as a player and made the transition into coaching. And I remember watching the training camp in Traverse City and thinking, man, I thought I worked hard, holy cow, were these guys talented, and did they ever work hard? So the skill level and work ethic and just sheer athleticism of these players at this level, it was something that I didn't have in my God-given ability. But that's why I found a path in coaching in terms of where I wanted to get to. And I'm thankful that I made that decision and put the work in required.
Did you know, even when you were playing and you played minor pro in the United States in some strange little towns, and you played in Europe in some strange little places, did you know then you were going to coach?
Well, John, what I always kind of say is that I thought I was a coach at 13 years old. I grew up in Toronto. I came through a hockey program in Toronto called the Seneca College Hockey School. And there were a lot of really good coaches there. And if you were a player and you had some leadership ability, they kind of brought you along in terms of starting out as a junior instructor and then working your way up to becoming an instructor. And a lot of really good hockey people came through that program. So if I was thinking of myself or describing my coaching career, I'd go back to that, because you learn how to deal with people, how to get your point across, how to make sure that everybody stays on task. And you're learning this as a 14, 15, 16-year-old young man who's trying in his own right to become a player, but you're developing skills that I think set you up as you move forward. And I never abandoned the grassroots kind of teaching as I've worked my way up the coaching ladder. I think that's actually where you can figure out a lot of things and then apply them as you hit your incremental steps.
Who are some names that
I remember when I was a young man, Adam Graves was my instructor. He was the guy that I really looked up to. He was someone that was just a phenomenal influence. Steve Spott, who's one of the coaches for the Vegas Golden Knights, ended up taking that hockey school over, and just a lot of really good people came through that program. And one of the side benefits why everybody wanted to work at that hockey school was that they had a great place to train off the ice, but they also had one of the best skates in Toronto. So you put your day of work in, you got to train, and then from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock every night, you were able to skate in one of the best skates. So worked out for everybody.
Well, so far so good. You learned your lessons well, it appears, and you've got your team playing well, and hopefully on the way to an appearance in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And look at, who knows, at the beginning of the season, I think if you'd canvassed the experts, the Edmonton Oilers would have been considered among the favorites to win the Stanley Cup. And maybe you've got this team playing that way again. And we wish you good luck and a long and prosperous career as a head coach in the National Hockey League. Thanks a lot for taking a few minutes for us today, Jay.
Thanks for having me on, Bob. Thank you, John.
Jay Woodcroft. We'll be back after these messages. Well, many thanks to Jay Woodcroft for joining us on the program.
I wish he would learn to talk. My God.
Yeah. Well, he's a Toronto boy. He grew up listening to me and you.
Well, you for sure.
Well, nobody listens to you. That's
not even at home. Trust me.
No, especially at home, John.
They're in an interesting spot in that Western Conference. You talked about the East being set. You're right. We just have to figure out who's playing whom. But you have the Oilers in LA. They're fighting for basically home ice as the 2-3 in the Pacific. Dallas has games in hand, but they lost to Seattle on the weekend, which was silly. I mean, Rick Bowness is going to look at that one and shake his head. But they have games in hand on Vegas. Vegas is still in tough, Bob, but they're playing much better right now. So Vegas, Nashville, and Dallas in the end will fight for the 2 wild card spots.
Yeah, and that's why I asked Jay about whether you look up or down, because you could look either way if you were the Edmonton Oilers. Calgary is not locked in first place. We all think of Calgary as this juggernaut. Well, what do they got? A 4-point lead on Edmonton? Yeah, 4-point lead.
Yeah.
LA's only 1 point ahead, but Edmonton has a game in hand. Vegas is only 3 points back, but they played one more. And then Dallas is right behind Vegas.
Yeah, I know there's still something to be decided in this last month before the regular season ends. And you have to wonder then who will, if the team that doesn't make the playoffs, who will pay the price, if there is, in fact, a price to be paid.
Well, and we brought this up the other day. You got 10, 11, 12, 13 games left in the NHL schedule.
Mhm.
Well, the NBA's got teams that got 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And that kind of throws you out of whack. You start looking at the standings round and you say, oh, well, there's not enough time for Edmonton to catch Calgary. And I haven't seen anybody talk about it, but it's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination.
No,
There's still plenty of time for that to happen.
yeah, you're not wrong. By the way, our pal Bruce Boudreau, there's rumblings out of Vancouver that Bruce Boudreau may not be back next year as head coach. That's something we're going to have to keep an eye on.
Can you quickly explain why they are suggesting?
Well, I think that there's an option on his contract. He had a portion of this year and next year on his contract, but there appears to be some wording in his contract that there's an option, and whether it will be used or not, that is the key thing in all this.
I can't imagine that they would want to fire him.
Oh, neither can I. I mean, he's done a remarkable job.
Well, whether he makes the playoffs or not, this team was dead and buried and in competition with Seattle for last place. In fact, I think Seattle was ahead of them at the time Boudreau took over, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you may be right.
In any event,
we'll keep an eye on that one.
Well, whether he's coach or former coach, I'm sure he'll still join us. That's it for today. We'll have something else for you tomorrow. Hope you join us. For John Shannon, Bob McCown. Goodbye, everybody.